Arlecchino is the brand new Pyro 5-star on-field DPS coming to Genshin Impact for version 4.6. In this video, we're going to go through exactly what her kit does, what we can and cannot know before her official release, and I'm going to give a little rant. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we've built and tested every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. So, what does Arlecchino do? How does she work? At first glance, she seems very confusing. So I'm going to break it down in very, very simple terms for you, and you will 100% easily understand how she works. So number one, she has a mechanic called Bond of Life. The Bond of Life here doesn't work the way Bond of Life normally does, so don't try and equate the two. That will only get you confused. The Bond of Life here essentially does two things. One, it stops her from healing, and two, it increases her attack power. The more bond she has, the more damage she does. And I guess I don't know if it's the bond that stops her from being healed. I think it is. She cannot be healed while she's in combat. So you can heal her outside of combat, but when you're in combat, such as the Spiral Abyss or in the overworld actually fighting enemies, you can't heal. So you have to actually go away from them, kind of like how you can't switch artifacts while you're in combat. That's how Arlecchino works. Now, how does she get Bond of Life? She gets Bond of Life by using her skills. And did they tell us any other ways specifically? And when she uses normal and charge attacks on enemies that have the Blood Debt Directive. What is the Blood Debt Directive, you ask? This is created when her elemental skill hits opponents. Think of it like Huta's Blood Blossom, in that it's sort of a marker that drains HP, does damage over time to enemies, except when she hits an enemy that has it, she gains more Bond of Life, meaning she does more damage. So this implies that she'll do some sort of ramping damage. So she'll start with decent damage because she gets Bond of Life just from her skill at a baseline, and then the more she attacks enemies that are applied with the mark that she gives, the more her ramping damage bonus will increase. Her elemental skill, or her elemental infusion to her normal and charge attack, will also be tied to the Bond of Life, meaning that to do pyro damage, you have to have at least some Bond of Life, and you do get some Bond of Life just by using your elemental skill, so you will do damage right off the hop. So I think that makes sense, right? No one's confused. I don't think anyone's confused. I think everyone gets it. You guys are all smart people. You get that. I think I explained that pretty well. Let's see. Is this the only other thing they did? I can't find a text box for it, but when she uses her burst, she heals herself. And this is the only way to actually heal Arlecchino's HP while she's in combat. Because once you're out of combat, you can heal again. So, but in the Abyss or just in the overworld in combat, the only way is to heal with her burst. Now, my guess, let's just think about this for a sec. I would like to also point out that we had no mention at all of any sort of resistance to interruption or damage reduction or anything like that, which means that she's going to be very squishy, very, very squishy. And because the only way she can be healed is through her own burst, her Farina synergy is also questionable, especially since Pyro characters really want to play Bennett, and she is a Pyro attack scaling character, so she probably wants to play Bennett. I mean, she can't heal from him, but he gives the biggest attack buff in the game. She can't be buffed by Farina, so what are the buffers we're left with? Bennett, Chevreuse, Yelan. These are probably the characters that she's going to want to be playing with. Obviously not all at the same time, but some kind of combination that uses these characteristics. And the reason why I put the comparison to Huta in the thumbnail is because she's a lot like Huta. She applies a pyro dot to enemies. She infuses her normal and charge attacks with pyro. Arlecchino technically doesn't drain her own HP, but she can't be healed, so it's somewhat similar to how Huta drains her HP. And Arlecchino also heals from her burst, as does Huta. So I think the similarities are very, very apparent. I think there are some key differences though. Huta can be healed. You don't always run her with a healer, but she can be healed. But Huta also has build HP, which means she's by default much tankier. She also has built-in interruption resistance, where Arlecchino might, but we didn't hear anything about it in the live stream, and no one's currently predicting that. So what does this tell me? This tells me that Arlecchino can be built with Huta's teams. So I think, VV Vape is going to be very good for Arlecchino. Now, there is a question on how fast does Arlecchino attack, because she's got these normal attacks. Unless certain ones are very, very highly scaling, and those are very consistently vapeable, it could be that maybe Vape isn't her best team, and that it's actually going to be something like Chevreuse. I mean, if she's a normal attacker, this is obviously going to be a good team. It's just the thing to consider is that that this team, Chevreuse and Bennett are keeping your team alive, but but Arlecchino can't be healed. So that's kind of rough. So here's my question. Is her damage going to be so high that it will make up for Bennett being on the team, for example, and you'll be able to replace him with Toma, and now you're going to be trading damage, but you're at least getting survivability? I think Toma seems like he should be really good with her. I think the one good thing about being a normal attack character, especially Arlecchino, is that unless her combos, like Yoimiya, need to be finished, like she's doing a 5-hit combo, you are going to be free to dash and dodge around, which could make it so that survivability isn't as much of an issue. Like, obviously it will be, but like for someone like Sino or someone like Yoimiya, it hurts to dodge because you're losing combo damage. But if Arlecchino doesn't have a specific combo and she's just sort of mashing normal attacks, that could be okay. Obviously another team that comes to mind is a double Hydro with Zhongli team. The thing about Huta is that she gives herself an attack steroid by converting HP to attack. So it could be that Arlecchino is just a downgrade in a team like this. There's the other thing to consider is that Arlecchino may be a bit more of an AoE character. And so if she's a bit more of an AoE character, it could be that Mono Pyro is going to be really good. If we look at her normal attacks, like it looks like that they have a really big AoE. Sometimes I think basically how good her AoE is sort of depends on how generous these hitboxes are, because the animations are what they are. But actually, if we go back here a little bit, she does hit the hilly trail all the way back here, even though, let's put it on slowdown. That one, it looked like it goes very far behind her. And then we'll watch this one on slow-mo. It reaches all the way back and hits this hilly trail, even though he looks kind of beyond her normal, that normal range that she has. So it could be that her range is actually bigger than it looks, which some characters' range is bigger than it looks, some is smaller. Like characters like Raiden Ayato is, the AoE is kind of bigger than it looks. And some characters have not as generous AoE. I won't mention any names because people are going to be triggered. So this could be really good. She could be like a really good AoE character. And I think that would separate her and give her an identity outside of Hutao comparisons and outside of Yoimiya comparisons and outside of other comparisons. Because I do also just want to talk about the absolute state of Pyro DPSs. When we look at the Pyro characters, we've got Amber. I mean, she is a DPS, but we won't talk about that. Support, DPS, support, off-field DPS. So, you know, the vast majority of Pyro characters are on-field DPSs. There's one off-field DPS, 1, 2, 3, 4 supports, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on-field Pyro DPSs. This is the most DPSs of any type. And I think it already was 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 for Hydro, 1, 2-ish, 3, 4 for cryo, 4-ish for Hydro, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even the most generous, only 5 Electro, maybe 6, I guess, if you're extremely generous. Animo has 3, 4 if you count Shenyun, which I think you could, I guess, but she's an off-field support too. Geo has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you're being extremely generous, and 1, 2. So essentially, Pyro is roughly double the amount of on-field DPSs that any other type has, which is kind of crazy. So it's like we really didn't need another Pyro DPS. So I feel like the way that she separates herself is she's better in AoE, because Linny, although he is mono Pyro, his AoE isn't like, his AoE is good. It's better than a bunch of them. But even then, Klee's like main thing is AoE. So are we just getting like bigger Klee? I think the biggest thing that this comes down to is how are her numbers tuned? Is she tuned so that when she's played with a shielder, this is what I'd have to guess. If I had to guess, she's tuned so that when she's with a shielder, she's going to feel slightly worse or a bit worse than all the other DPSs. And when she's without a shielder and just using damaging options, she's going to feel like one of the best characters carries in the game. If you cannot die, it's going to be a high risk, high reward character, or you lower the risk and lower the reward by putting on another character that gives you defensive utility. So that's where I think we're going to land. But as I said in my banner review video, there is really no way to know for sure. Everything about her hinges on how does she feel to play. At the end of the day, how does she feel to play? How good do these teams actually feel in practice? That will determine everything about whether or not she's a good character. She's almost definitely getting a new artifact set as the new artifact set is coming out. I'll make a video on it when the news gets dropped. So yeah, the question is, how will she really feel to play? So if you want to know that, I'll be testing. I have every single character built now. So I'll be testing her with every single character in the game that it makes sense to test her with, and give you the lowdown on, you know, what if Arlecchino Melt is secretly good, right? It doesn't look like it because she's a normal attacker, but maybe you can reverse Melt with Rosaria. I don't know. That sounds pretty interesting. I'll give it a test because I've built every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. So subscribe. I have early access to Arlecchino, so I'll be releasing my guide the minute her banner drops. So turn on notifications for that, and take care. Bye for now.